In this video, I'm going to cover the dark side of the podcast industry, and I'm going to expose the biggest secret that most podcast hosts do not want you to know, predominantly because it's going to cost them a lot of money, but save you a lot of money. Now, for those of you that are new here, I'm Devin Rodriguez, founder of podcastguest.io, and over the past years, we've helped over 300 of the highest level business owners in a variety of different industries, not only get booked on the top podcasts in their industries, but also share with them all of the best practices to be able to convert the conversations that they're having into conversions so that ultimately they can grow their revenue. Now, for the topic of today's video, I got a real treat for you all, and it's probably going to cause a lot of people in the industry that I operate in, which is the podcast industry, to not like me so much. And I'm probably going to ruffle a few feathers, potentially even have some people message me after seeing this and say,
"Why'd you tell the people about what I do?"
And I'm going to tell you very briefly, over the past few years, video podcasts specifically have been on the rise. You've seen Chris Williamson, Diary of a CEO. There's more and more in-person podcasts that are coming about. And as a result, people really have the desire to be on in-person podcasts. Now, counterintuitive to what most people think, in-person podcasts are still a very new concept. So although they are on the rise compared to audio-based podcasts, which are on Apple and Spotify, there's actually very few of them. And more importantly, the video-based podcasts compared to audio-based podcasts actually have a significantly lower reach more times than not, which is something that a lot of people don't understand. But to get right to the dark side, what I mean by this is since there has been an increase in the number of video podcasts, but also an increase in the desire for people, specifically business owners, to be on in-person podcasts, predominantly because they view these in-person shows as higher level. Because it's like me right now in a studio. You got a studio, you get really great footage, you can repurpose the footage into clips, etc. But once again, if you go on YouTube and you look at the actual numbers that most in-person podcasts, I'm not talking about Diary of a CEO and all, they're not really getting that many views. But to go one step further than that, what I've identified is that there are hosts out there that understand that you watching this probably want to be a guest on their in-person podcast where they set up the fancy 4K footage and they invite you into a nice studio, you shake hands, you get to know the person. But this is what's been happening. And this is what I would argue to be the most unethical thing that is currently happening in the podcast industry. A podcast host will invite you onto their podcast. Maybe they'll send you a DM. Hell, you might have even experienced something like this. Or you'll get a DM that says something like, "Hey, we would love to have you on our show." And you respond and you look at their profile, and their profile shows that they have hundreds of thousands of Instagram followers, or millions of followers, or thousands of subscribers, hundreds of thousands of subscribers, millions of subscribers. So of course you get excited because you're like, "Oh my God, this is going to be so incredible for my business. I'm going to get all of this exposure." And you respond to that message, that email, wherever it came from, and they say, "Fill out the application." So you go, you put in your information, you put your first name, your last name, your email, your phone number, you put your bio in there, you put whatever topics you want to talk about. And at the bottom it says, "This podcast requires an investment of X number of dollars." And this is where things get very scary and very unethical. See, the thing is that there are podcast hosts right now that are going out and asking you to be a guest on their podcast, but not divulging the fact that it's going to cost you a lot of money to be a guest on their show. Now, when I say a lot, I see shows that are ranging anywhere really from $2,000 all the way up to $50,000+ in order to be a guest. So what will happen, and this is the really dark side of it, is these podcast hosts will go out and buy their followers. They will go out and buy their YouTube subscribers. And what they will do is they know that that is going to look very sexy and alluring to you. It's like the woman in the red dress. But what podcast hosts do is they know that most people are driven by vanity metrics, that the perceived value of their podcast is in direct correlation to their social media following. Now, quick side note on that. That actually couldn't be further from the truth, because in today's day and age, still, most people listen to podcasts rather than watch them. That is what the data shows. In fact, it's funny because 70% of people, I saw a study study last year that was done. 70% of people prefer to watch a podcast, but only 20% of podcasts even have a video option. So with that being said, most people are still forced to go consume podcasts on audio-based platforms because that's where most podcasts still are. But in the age of social media, these podcast hosts know that the perceived value from their show is based on their social media following. So what they will do is they will invite you onto their show, and they will invite you on knowing that you might just pull the trigger on spending $7,500, $10,000, $20,000 because you look at them and they have millions of followers, millions of subscribers. But I want you, let's just time out here and pause for a minute. Before you ever make a decision to invest in any podcast that is asking for a fee, I'm going to break down for you what exactly you need to do. Step number one in the process is to go to whatever social channels they do have and validate the engagement. In other words, if they have 1 million followers, but they're only getting a couple of hundred of likes, the math is not mathing, as the kids would say. Or number two, if you go to their Instagram and you go to the comment section and they all sound the same, I'm sure you've seen it. It's like,
wow, sounds interesting. Amazing episode. Such an enlightening conversation.
And it's clearly bots. It's clearly bots that are bought by the podcast host. Because initially you go view their profile, you'll see 3,000 likes, 297 comments, and you're like, oh my God, this is gonna be an absolutely great show for me to go on. And that is a trap that people fall into because they do not do their due diligence. So, number one, check the engagement. Go check how many likes they're getting, how many comments they're getting. But even more than that, go and actually check the comments. Make sure that they are real people with real profiles. Go and check their followers. Make sure that they are real people with real profiles. Check the likes. Make sure that they are real profiles with real people. And I speak so passionately about this because what I've seen happen so many times is I've spoken to business owners that have invested $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 going on podcasts that if they would have came to me first, I would have easily been able to save them those $30,000 by just pointing out to them the fact that this is fugazi, that this is a podcast that is literally stealing your money because they have all of these vanity metrics that look good to the naked eye. But to people like me who have actually been in the industry, we're able to steer you out of that direction. So that's the first thing you want to do is you want to go and you want to check, let me check their engagement. On YouTube, what you want to do is you want to go and you want to check their subscribers. Okay, that's the first thing. Number two, more importantly, even more so than subscribers, is go to the comments below their videos. If a show has 1 million subscribers and they have 2 comments, guess what? It's all fake. Or if they have a bunch of subscribers, they have a bunch of comments, but once again, you see that it's the same reoccurring comment. And the easiest way to tell is if there's no real specificity to the comment. Like you could tell when somebody genuinely left a comment because they wanted to leave a comment based upon what they watched in that video. But then you could also tell when it's one of those bot comments that were bought where it says,
super interesting. Loved the episode. Devin was so enlightening of how he talked about podcasts.
Clearly bought. So I'm sharing this with you because what's happening is these hosts are inviting you onto their podcast. They're most of the time hiding the fact that there is a large fee associated with being a guest on their podcast. But the way that they are literally able to make hundreds of thousands of dollars per month is by masquerading the facade with vanity metrics that are 100% fluff. Now, once again, I want to make very, very, very clear that I am not talking about every podcast because there are podcasts out there that do charge, that we personally work with, that we vet. Also, that we are able to get you on for a fraction of the price of what you were able to get yourself on. But with that being said, there are also podcasts out there that are making a business out of getting people to pay them tens of thousands of dollars based upon vanity metrics that have no substantiated data behind them. Now, next thing you want to do after you check the engagement on all of the platforms, before you ever pull the trigger, is you want to ask the host of this podcast or whoever from their team is reaching out to you, you want to make sure that you ask them for the actual data on those platforms. Because here's the thing, if they're going to ask you for $7,500, $25,000, whatever it is, you want to get the real data. So here's what you want to ask them. First thing you want to ask, because once again, most of these even video-based podcasts have a much larger audience audience on the audio-based platforms, step number one that you want to do is you want to say, please send me a screenshot of your podcast hosting platform showing how many downloads your podcast has received in the last 30 days. Now, this is a number that only the podcast host will have access to, because what happens is the downloads that a podcast gets on Apple or Spotify, that's what I mean when I say downloads. That is specifically how many people have listened to that podcast in the last 30 days. That is only accessible to a podcast host. Apple Podcast, Spotify, they do not divulge that information to you. So unfortunately, you can't see that. I can't see that. There are tools out there that we use to estimate how many listeners a month a podcast gets or how many downloads a month a podcast will get, but there is no 100% way to know unless the podcast host themselves goes into their podcast hosting platform, which is like Buzzsprout, Libsyn, all of these podcast hosting platforms, and you ask them, send me a screenshot directly from your podcast hosting platform showing how many downloads your podcast has received in the last 30 days, because that is the real metric. Those are the metrics that substantiate or falsify what it is that they're saying. They can't refute that. And I'm going to tell you a little story. I did that once with a podcast, and they didn't actually want that much money. It was an audio-based podcast, and this is the other thing that to really worry about, and this is a very dark side of it. The podcast host said, I'm in the top 1% of all podcasts. And they got that data from a company named Listen Notes. And Listen Notes, what it does is it takes podcasts and it says, you're in the top 1%, you're in the top 5%. Here's the really interesting thing. When my podcast first entered the top 2%, I was only getting about 500 to 1,000 downloads a month. That is 500 to 1,000 people that my podcast was reaching on a monthly basis. So isn't it really interesting that a podcast can say it's in the top 2% of all shows in the world, but only get about 500 to, on average, 700 people a month listening? Really interesting, isn't it? So what this host proceeded to do was, instead of sending me the actual data from the podcast hosting platform, he sent me a screenshot of the Listen Notes global ranking that showed that this person was in the top, I think it was 0.5% actually, of all podcasts in the world. Whoa, that sounds so cool, right? Well, guess what I did? I asked the founder of Listen Notes, I said, what does that mean? And what they said was, well, that's very internal information. We cannot divulge that to you. It is pretty much based off of a couple of different things. Number one, press features and press mentions. Well, here's the thing. I could just go out and pay Forbes, pay Yahoo, pay all of these different platforms to put me in press. So if I do that, guess what it's going to do to my global ranking? It's going to make it go up, but it's all fabricated because it's based off of things that I bought. Okay. It's based off of, number two, what they said was a combination
of social engagement and viewership of the podcast.
It's a bunch of BS, and it drives me crazy. Why? Because they are getting people like you and even me in the past, before I became so damn educated on this, to pay hundreds, thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars based upon false information. And it pisses me off because what I see time and time again, I had a client of mine named Doug. He spent $150,000 and went on over 1,000 podcasts and then got on a call with me to get him booked on hyper-targeted podcasts that got him in front of his ideal client. I wish Doug would have came to us before that. I really do. I really do. And here's the thing. The people in my industry, the podcast booking space, they don't want to share this information with you because this is the stuff that they sell you on. We're going to get you on top 5%. We're going to get you on podcasts with X number of listeners that they can't even substantiate. Where they're going to have big social following. All of this junk that they are quite literally lying to you about because it sounds good, but it's not actually good. So ask them further, if a podcast host is ever asking you to pay, number one, send me a direct screenshot from your podcast hosting platform showing me how many downloads the podcast has received in the last 30 days. Number two, if the podcast is in person and they have a big YouTube presence, go ahead and ask them to send you their YouTube Studio Analytics. I want to see average watch time. I want to see how many views they've gotten in the past 30 days, how many views per video they've gotten. Why? Why would you go? Because you're paying them. So you want to make sure that what you're paying for is actually going to produce a result for you. So don't allow them to just say,
we have X number of followers, we have X number of subscribers,
and get you to drop a good old $10,000 like I see so many people do. Like, no exaggeration. There's podcasts out there, I'm not going to name any names. They post A lot of podcasts. They make hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, exactly from what I'm talking about right now. And every time that I see one of those individuals on that podcast, my heart genuinely hurts because I know that that business owner is going on that podcast in good faith that it is going to lead to them getting more clients. But what I know is it's not going to do a damn thing for them. Sure, you're going to get some good content. You can come here and you could rent this studio out for, I don't know, $200 for the hour, $400 for the hour. I don't know what it is exactly. I forget. I got a monthly subscription, so please mind me, okay? But with that being said, it drives me nuts because I see so many podcast hosts that are getting rich off of literally scamming people that in good faith believe that as a result of that podcast, their business is going to grow. And we know that it's not. And that's why we do what we do. That's why the clients we work with, we take deliberate, intentional, orchestrated, calculated moves to get them on podcasts that, number one, have real substantiated data, but more importantly, number two, actually have their ideal audience tuning in. Because here's the thing, a lot of these big podcasts, cool, it's good to go on it. Number one, like I said, a lot of the times it's fugazi. But number two, a lot of the times the podcast is so broad that they talk about a variety of different topics. And when a podcast talks about a variety of different topics, the chances that your audience is tuning into that show is not as high as if you went on a niche specific podcast. And most of those niche specific podcasts are actually still audio-based shows. So with that being said, what you ultimately want to do is ask yourself the question, if I was to step into the shoes of my ideal client who is currently facing those challenges, those problems, the things that they're currently going through, where would I be looking for that solution? Because there's two different types of ways that you need to be looking at being a guest on podcast. The first one is like what I call direct fit podcast. A direct fit podcast would be, let's say you're a sales trainer, you go on a sales podcast. That is a direct fit. But actually where most of the ROI comes from is what I call indirect fit podcasts, which are podcasts that might not be about sales, but let me give you a great example. We currently work with a sales trainer and we bought him a podcast that was about real estate investing. And he was like, real estate investing? How does this make any sense? I said, here's the thing that you need to understand. Real estate investors are looking to become more wealthy. They have capital that they are able to deploy out into the real estate market in order to grow their portfolio. So the underlying desire that they have is to become more wealthy. Well, let me ask you this. Who are the most wealthy people in society? Business owners. And business owners, if they increase their sales, what will that do for them? That will help them become more wealthy. So by positioning you on a podcast that's even about real estate investing, you're getting in front of, number one, business owners, but number two, business owners that have the same desired outcome that you help people achieve, which is to become more wealthy. So by going on a real estate investing podcast, especially if the host wants to have you on, clearly they see a way that they could fit it into the conversation. You are able to position your message in front of the person that has the desired outcome that you help people achieve. Real estate, sales, they're just different vehicles, but the outcome is the same. So you want to look at what are the direct fit podcasts and the indirect fit podcasts that are going to get you in front of your ideal client. And once again, you want to focus on the outcome, Remember, nobody cares about, I help you get booked on podcast or I help you lose weight in this way. They just care about, I just want more clients. I just want to lose weight. And to just give you one more example, I worked with a client named Heather and she helped perimenopausal women lose weight. But the way that she did it, she pretty much helped them lose weight by increasing how many calories they ate. Don't ask me to explain it. I'm not a genius when it comes to this. I brought her a podcast that was about intermittent fasting, which is the complete opposite of what it is that she talks about. She helps people eat more. Intermittent fasting is about eating less. And I brought it to her and she said, Devin, I don't think that this is an alignment. This isn't going to get me in front of my ideal client. And let me just preface this by saying, in no way, shape, or form is this any type of financial guarantee or statement, because you might not do what she did, which was listen to us, and you're not going to get the result. Just being honest with you. Okay. So don't take this to say that this is exactly what's going to happen if you hired us. I don't know if you're going to listen to anything that I tell you to do. So anyways, Heather, she said, Devin, I don't know if this is a good podcast. I'm going to pass on this one. And this is what I explained to her. I said, Heather, listen, the people that listen to a podcast about fasting don't care about fasting as much as they do about the end result that fasting will help them achieve, which is losing weight. So by positioning yourself on that podcast, although it's not a direct fit, what you're doing is you're bringing them a solution to the problem that they're trying to solve. And now here's the thing. How many people listening to that show have probably tried fasting and it hasn't worked, and now they're looking for an alternative solution? They just haven't heard of yours yet. She went on to that show. She made over $60,000 from that very first podcast that she went on. And mind you, this is a woman that speaks broken English. She speaks English rather well, but you could tell she has an accent. She's from China, and she crushed it. Why? Number one, because she listened to what the hell we told her to do in terms of how to actually convert from these podcasts. But number two, she went on a show that got her in front of people that have the problem that she helps people solve and have the desire that she helps people ultimately step into it and fulfill. So with that being said, this is a very dark industry. The purpose of me creating this video is to purely help you save your time and your money by falling into the trap that I see so many business owners falling into, which is going on all of these BS podcasts that don't do a damn thing. And listen, if you are somebody and you're watching this and you're like, I do want to go on in-person podcasts, I love the content, but I want to go on really legit ones that have validated numbers, hit us up. That's what we do all day. Down below, you can book a call with the team. We'll walk you through the entire process of exactly how it works. And the cool part about working with us is instead of paying all of these exorbitant prices, we get our clients on these podcasts for a fraction of the price of what it would cost you if you wanted to do it yourself, because we got the relationships, we got the Rolodex, and we're able to make things happen and actually get you on podcasts that move the needle in your business rather than this BS vanity metric driven society crap that these people are selling individuals and business owners on, and just keeping them stuck. And ultimately, this is why I'm so passionate, because it makes the industry look really damn bad. So hopefully this video helped you avoid making a multi-$1,000 mistake based upon some guru or guy out there or woman out there that's trying to sell you on some vanity metric fluff.